Welcome back to America Decides. You may have noticed, we certainly have, that a lot of elite institutions under pressure of executive orders or the very threat of an executive orders have begun cutting deals or trying to cut deals with the Trump administration to avoid all sorts of consequences. It includes big law firms, universities, even news organizations. Our good friends over at Politico have dubbed this possibly a new era in American politics called the Great Grovel. The author of that article, Politico's global editor-in-chief, good friend of mine, John Harris, joins me. John, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Hello, Major.
So, why does this grovel matter?
Oh, I think it's a remarkable picture into the mindset of people in America with power and how they're responding to this remarkable moment with a very aggressive, very disciplined new administration, determined to bring its adversaries or perceived adversaries to heel. Now, I suppose that part is not such a surprise. President Trump had made clear that he was keeping a list. But it turns out he really meant it. What has been a surprise to me is the ease with which he's been able to bring these institutions into line, put them on a leash.
It's not only surprised you, John, to a certain degree, it has surprised the president. He talked about that earlier this week. Let's listen.
You see what we're doing with the colleges, and they're all bending and saying, sir, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And nobody can believe it, including law firms that have been so horrible, law firms that nobody would believe, and they're just saying, where do I sign? Where do I sign? Nobody can believe it.
Where do I sign? Right. And not all law firms, but some very prominent law firms, powerful ones in Washington. One of them cut a deal at $40 million of pro bono work for administration-favored causes. Then the price went up to $100 million. And it now looks like maybe that law firm might have got a discounted rate because they were the first one to basically bend the knee.
Yeah. You know, a couple things that come to mind from that, Major. One is, I don't think people generally, I would say, I certainly didn't, realize the number of pressure points. You think of a law firm, it's a private institution. Columbia University, it's a private Ivy League institution with big endowment. You think that they were fully independent and fully able to be insulated from power. And the reality is the reach of the federal government with its funding, if it's going to be somebody that's prepared to wield that leverage very aggressively, as President Trump and his team have made clear they are, actually these institutions, private institutions, are much more interwoven and connected to the power of the federal government than we realize.
Exactly, and it's not just Columbia. University of Penn, UPenn, Harvard, Princeton, Brown, all have been threatened with federal funds being withheld and are all in now some manner or another trying to negotiate their way out of the withholding of those federal research funds or other kinds of funds.
The other thing that comes to mind, Major, and I think this in many, many contexts, do people contemplate that someday this particular president or the party he represents won't be in power? So if you're the law firm that gave $40 million in pro bono to President Trump's causes, or $100 million, as one of the others did, is that a new precedent? If there's a Democratic president in 2029, what will be the amount of pro bono work that they'll give to that president?
That is one of these great institutional questions, because not only is it about what's happening now, what are the lingering echo effects?
President Trump, with, as I say, much more discipline and sense of purpose than I think he showed in his first term, or that we were quite prepared. We had quite reckoned with what we were going to see in this term. He's using and expanding dramatically the powers of the presidency, but those expanded powers will presumably be held by some other president and by some other party. So I think the implications for how power works, how accountability works in our system, that just couldn't be more breathtaking.
And John, you're a student of all this. Is one of the stories here that maybe these things, meaning large private institutions, whether they're law firms or universities, should be as interwoven as they've become with the federal government? Is that part of this story, that they have allowed themselves to sort of become vulnerable in ways they didn't even expect? And if they unwound that, they would decrease their vulnerability?
Well, I mean, money is leverage, and if you are willing to separate yourself from the money, then somebody doesn't have leverage over you. But we are a very interconnected economy. in which the federal government is always either directly involved or just one degree of separation from involvement. I have noticed a paradox. You would think that as corporations become bigger, their revenue streams become more diverse. The same thing is true of law firms. They become big corporate institutions. That would give them a measure of insulation. Actually, the opposite is true. They perceive more points of vulnerability. I think in the old days, a law firm, an established Washington law firm, they would say, hey, look, if somebody's trying to bully and intimidate us, we don't welcome it. If it cuts our revenue, like that's not great. But we've been here a long time, or we're going to be here a long time, and if we had to take a short-term loss, we would do it. These big law firms now, they don't want to do that. They've got their corporations, and they've got really high demands for profit. The fact that if ABC was just fully an independent news organization, I think there would have been no way they would have cut that settlement with President Trump. They weren't. They were part of the larger Disney corporation, where they clearly made a calculation. We don't need the hassle. A big check, I think it was $15 million, that's nothing compared to the size of economic interests that are at stake in this matter.
And it's worth pointing out, John, before we close out, that some law firms in town are suing over this.
Absolutely, yes.
And
Not
they are
everybody is
not
caving.
There are
not everybody is
Great Grovel.
Exactly.
But a lot of institutions are, and that was the point of the piece. Great read.
Thank you so much.
John Harris, thanks so very much.